Hey everybody, welcome to the Games Tavern Happy Hour. I'm Mack, and today I am joined by Reid.
Hey!
Can we get a sound check out there? Is everybody hearing us okay? I know we've had a couple problems with that in the past. Alright, well while we're waiting for the feedback there, tonight we're going to be talking about a couple of different semi-related... I'm extra loud. Alright, let's see if I can't solve that there. Tonight we're going to be talking about a bunch of different, or two separate related items. We're going to be talking about how to build a story, and then how to actually take that, the way that we talk about building a story and building it into a narrative dungeon. So you're not just walking in and having random things going on there. But before we get into the whole meat and potatoes of the stream, what have you been up to this week, Reid? You getting any fun gaming or hobby activities coming in?
Aside from show-related stuff, I've been doing a little bit of painting. I'm working on a werebear right now,
Ooh.
and I have a werewolf right behind that. The big thing I'm setting up for the next That Minis Paint show is going to be a hill giant. And actually, I have been doing quite a great deal of campaign development as well, which kind of leads into what we're talking about today. I kind of feel lucky that you invited me on today for this particular discussion that we're going to have, but because of where I'm at with my own process right now too. So.
Oh, perfect! I'm glad to
And
be of
then,
help.
yeah, and then also just kind of talking to some really cool people in this industry, and getting to know their insights on some stuff too. So it's been kind of cool on the game side too. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been doing, been working on a couple. There was a new Warhammer announcement, and I got hyped and dragged back into that. So I've been working on some experience.
Yeah, man.
So that's fun. But I also got some new stuff coming in. I got a Into the Borderlands old school stuff that's coming for a whole bunch of old modules that were built and redone by Goodman Games. And you know how big of a fan I am of their DCC stuff, so I'm excited.
Yeah, we've been talking back and forth, I think, pretty consistently about that in the Discord too. I've been excited to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, that should be a fun one. I don't know if we'll actually end up putting it on camera, but we'll take some videos and pictures and stuff and let everybody know at least.
I'm sure that there will be some awesome behind-the-scenes discussions on that one.
It should be fun.
Yeah.
Besides that, I don't think there's any big tabletop news that's been going on recently. Let's probably get right into the main thing, right?
Just nothing that's opening. Put it that way.
There we go.
A whole lot of stuff that's not going to go off in terms of conventions and stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know Nova got canceled in the last week, and that's the Northern Virginia Invitational and whatnot. So that was kind of a bummer here, but everybody's got to stay safe. You know, can't be upset about that.
Absolutely.
So on to happier pastures.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about first part here is going to be talking about story arcs, and this is as simple as it can be. It's what you're trying to do. What is the goal of your campaign? What is the overall where you're taking the characters? Who do you want them to fight? Vaguely, what do you want them to do? Where do you want them to go? And how do you want that to kind of end up depending on how they're going to do things? Before we get into this is just one of many schools of thoughts out there on how to do this. My own opinions on how I actually run stories and the arcs I build are different than Reid. And they're different than Rob and different than Carly and different than everybody else that we've had on the show. Everybody has their own way of doing this. So we have two different ways we're going to show you today that we both sort of subscribe to. And take whatever nuggets you want to from here and build them into your own games. This isn't the right or wrong way to do this. I feel like we're saying that a lot every time that we do this, but it has to be stressed. We're not saying you're right or wrong, or we're right and you're wrong for doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big things in narrative and literature and stuff, you're familiar with the monomyth, the hero's journey, right, Reid?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a common writing method.
Yeah, it's for anybody out there who's not familiar with that one. It's the idea that every great story, every great movie, every great book, every great play, whatever, every great consumed form of media has the same story or the same recurring cast of characters of the hero comes in and he has to meet his mentor and he gets I don't remember what the name of it, but the inciting action thing that gets him out the door, and he meets gatekeepers and all of these other things. That's a good literary technique. It doesn't really work for tabletop, though. One of the big problems one of the big differences that we have between us and Literary writers is we don't have full control every single character, right?
Well, I think you get into the discussion of what's the difference between a book where the author is writing for a reader and the reader is following along that hero's journey versus an ensemble cast of players that are creating this that have free agency to do all sorts of things, including the wrong thing, quote unquote,
Yeah.
or something completely off the wall that you weren't expecting, versus what you have put together. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things I try to do isn't so much write a very cohesive. They're going to go here, do this, go to that. I try to build a world that they're doing and have something that's a driving action in the world that
Hmm.
they have to interact with in some capacity, and that's what will take them on the story arc we're about to talk about. So let's see if I can actually make this work. We're trying a new technical thing, so hold on to your pants, everybody. This is going to be good. Here we go. So this is the story arc that I personally subscribe to when I'm trying to write or when I'm trying to work on this, and it's built up of 5 major parts. And we can do examples later if we really want to. But it has the exposition, the background, the this can be covered in a lot of stuff I do. Honestly, it's covered in a sort of the background email or background note of the discussion I have with my players before we even get the campaign going. It's like, this is the world you live in. This is what we're doing. This is the town that you grow up in, and it's great. Build a character that fits into that. Most of that gets filled into the exposition, and you get most of that can also kind of fit into session 0 or session 1. That's
Hmm.
just setting the stage. How was? I know you have a slightly different method there, Reid. What is the way that you're doing? How are you doing your different? You're setting the stage, expository kind of session 1, session 0 kind of stuff there.
So before we even get to a session zero, I usually have when I look at a campaign as a whole, and there's a reason I bring it up this way is unless I'm doing a specific you recently were doing in the process of doing Tomb of Horrors, for example. So that's a very specific thing that we're doing, and once that's done, those characters will go forth and do great things or be dead.
Yeah,
Knowing you, they'll be dead.
I'm trying.
But and then that is a very short pathway, right? So that path is the beginning and the end right there. So I work a little differently. I have a beginning and an end. Uh, but there's more to it than I think I kind of also alleged a little bit too. So I also divided up because of Dungeons and Dragons, and I could do it with other game systems as well if they are useful for that purpose, with the various different tiers. So tier is 1 through 4, levels 1 through 4. That's tier 1. Tier 2 is level 5 through 10. Tier 3 is level 11 through 15, and tier 4, final tier, is obviously 16 through 20. Um, and then potentially there's rules for going beyond that if you feel the need.
Yeah,
But I create a beginning and an end for the overarching campaign, and then I try to figure out the beginning and the end for each tier. So there's a series of subcomponents that helps me chunk it down. And then I work on the tier that we're in as we go, and as well as already beforehand, I'll have stuff. So there's some stuff I'm already brewing for example, Whiskey Magic and Destruction. There's stuff that's already being set in motion for that, but I don't spend a whole lot of time on those later tiers because unless it's something that absolutely has to happen,
yeah,
as from a story perspective or a clues perspective or something else. Um, and if I spend too much time on that, then it becomes linear, and that becomes a problem.
yeah. You
Um,
want to make sure
and
that the
also,
story reflects what they do in the lower tiers.
exactly. So outside of certain very specific things that I know are going to happen regardless, I create all these various different encounters, and these encounters are not in a specific order necessarily. Um, it's in a similar vein to how you look at the Dragon Heist book. Uh, Dragon Heist is a fantastic book because it's literally the same adventure 4 completely different ways, 4 completely different villains, and you have the same locations, but different things can happen there based on who's the villain and who's not,
Yeah,
right? And so, in a similar vein, but not quite like that, I create these various different encounters, and those encounters, most of them may or may not occur based on what players do, and they certainly may or may not occur in order. Um,
Yeah,
but what
that's
by not focusing on the order of it and focusing more on just the player interactions and letting them happen naturally, it does two things. One, players actually get choice or the illusion of choice. I make jokes. Players do have choice in our games, like in my games in particular.
oh yeah,
But in some cases, whether they know it or not, a few of those choices are going to lead to the same place regardless, right? And that's because of the way the encounters are built. It allows me that freedom to plug those in any way I need to allow the story to continue without breaking the story for the players as well. That also gives me the room. If I'm talking too much, let me know.
no,
That
you're
also
good.
gives
I'm
me
enjoying it.
the room just as importantly to let the players also make their own story, and be able to be reactive and improv as needed for that purpose.
Yeah, that's having the way I try to do it is I try to have the highlights fleshed out, the things that the must dos. They're good. They have to get to this city and meet the king because otherwise the world will end. They have to eventually have a big standoff with this evil lich over there. Otherwise, this horrible thing happens. There's going to be a dragon and kind of mesh it together. But it's not laying out a very specific path. It's not. We're not writing books. That's simply the way it happens. I know I joke a lot on the Discord about players ruining my perfect stories, uh, but that's the way it is. I'm not. If I wanted a perfect story, I'd write a book and have full control over it. I don't do that. I'm playing with a bunch of other people. We're here to have a good time, and people are going to kind of go off and do their own thing. I'm not writing a script for them. So that's where the blank framework that I have with mine, or with the story arc, which I think we get taught in basic elementary or middle school or something like that years ago, about how a story works. There's the five main components: is the background, the exposition, the inciting incidents, why your character is going on a quest, the rising action, are all the various trials and tribulations and things that build them up to make them the hero that they need to do to fight the big bad, and then they have the climax, which is where they fight the lich or meet the king or whatever it is that they want to do, and then have the payoff at the end of the falling action. That's my main things, and I was playing around with it a minute ago and just kept screwing it up. But that's on the screen now. Let's see if I can't get the other one on, because the way that this sounds very linear. Where it's if you get kicked out the door and you have to do this quest, then you finish it, and then it's over. Uh, Whereas generally it's not this very clean arc. It's usually going to be there we go. It's usually going to be here we go. Yeah, so it's usually going to be a lot of mini climaxes and more inciting action to get them on to the next step. Side quests or a variety of different smaller major quests over hurdles that they have to jump. One of the perfect. Everyone's familiar with Lord of the Rings in our zeitgeist here. So one of the ones I like to do when talking about this is actually talking about the entire Lord of the Rings. The exposition is everything that happens before Bilbo puts on the ring at his birthday party. It tells you the world that they live in and gets you to care about the characters. Then between putting the ring on and kicking and Gandalf coming and saying, "Hey, you need to meet me in Bree," and there's this ring is very bad, but that is the inciting action to get him going. And then there's the rising action, which is everything from there until they throw the ring into Mount Doom. That everything there falls in the rising action, but you have a whole bunch of small miniature climaxes the entire time. They have small quests that they have to fight. They have to do the fight at Weathertop. They have to do the fight at on the way between there and Rivendell, the fight of Gondor, the Mines of Moria. There's a whole bunch of small hurdles that they have to accomplish, and each of them has their own sort of lead impetus. Oh, well, we can't do this, so now we need to do that. And building a lot of flexibility in something we as DMs can appreciate. We can use to our advantage. So, how much? I can't hear you, Reid.
Actually, sorry about that. Not sure what happened there.
I saw you laughing silently. I was like, he's on mute. We're fine. I'll keep going.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things that I'll bring up is with that graphic. So in a similar vein, if you look at each part where the rise happens just before a short fall, that's tier one, and then a rise
Yep.
happens before short fall, that's tier two. So that rising action and that peak just before it drops again, that peak is what I call my culminating event for that tier. So, for example, in Whiskey, Magic, and Destruction, we started off humbly in Triel in our session zeros and preliminary sessions. The stream picked up at North Fort near Fort Tamal. It then
Yeah.
traveled into, and there was a variety of different encounters that you had, and then you got to Waterdeep and you had a variety of different encounters. And then right after you hit level 5, culminating moment, there's a fight with a wizard in the city.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
perfect.
yeah, and that kind of set up for that whole purpose of that culminating moment.
Yeah.
When that culminating moment occurred was based on a trigger. In this case, the trigger was after they hit level 5, as reasonable as it takes without breaking story completely, this is going to happen. So
Yeah,
if that
that's
helps you, that graphic actually kind of in some ways, if I could put additional stuff on it, I think I may actually take that graphic and do it.
it's all yours.
Um,
I'll email it to you.
yeah, uh, that's basically the gist of it. Is that culminating? I also like to plug in the cap on every one of those a culminating event.
Yeah, each of those small little peaks there is in the way I've built it, it's a mini climax and a mini falling action.
Hmm.
So we had the inciting action in, if we're just going to use Whiskey Magic Instruction, because that's what everyone watches. Uh, if you're just using Whiskey Magic Instruction, we had the initial get, all of the various stuff, get us to Waterdeep. And
Hmm.
that gets resolved there. It's like, all right, well, we're standing around, we're waiting for something to happen. That got the climax of that is sort of the getting to Waterdeep and hanging out, waiting, seeing there's something more to Ren and the WMD West Mercantile Diversified org that we're in. And then we meet the wizard, and presumably this next episode is going to start tying some things together and show us more. Hey, you need to go do a thing here or a thing there, or we get arrested by the constabulary. Either way, short campaign, we're good.
But there was a lot of things that occurred both on the way and then after you got to Waterdeep. So the other thing I will mention is not in every single encounter that you have, but in many of them, there's little clues that get dropped without giving you everything. The players still have to figure things out, or not. Um, and I do try to sprinkle in a certain amount of clues in every one of them. I try to look at which clues are where,
Oh, they,
and I
they
don't
definitely
necessarily
are.
say where the clues. I do make a list of clues that I want the players to get, but I don't necessarily, unless I know specifically certain things. Uh, some of those clues will not drop without a trigger. Some of those clues will automatically drop in certain events that I know you're going to be in. But I also leave clues out ready to plug into an event, however creatively I need to do it so that you find it.
Yeah, there's always the burnt scroll that someone happened to be carrying, or the note of "please kill these people," or the dying gasp of the warriors saying "please go do that." It's something that you just have to get them into the next area. You
Yeah,
have to
and you
drive the
you've
players a little bit.
you've seen me do that in our previous campaigns as well.
Yeah,
Like I knew because I know those characters at the time, predictively, that someone was going to use fire on somebody, a fire spell of some sort. And the person who happened to have the map had a half burned map prop that I had ready to go, that I handed over. And you guys had some, and you could see where a statement was written, but half of it was cut off because of the way the paper got burned.
yeah.
But there was just enough there to make you guys go, huh, and that really, had some openings later on,
That
potentially as well.
that
So it
never
just
got
depended on where
resolved.
the
Actually, thinking about it.
no, you didn't because we ended that test run and then transitioned over to this one, and
Right.
I've saved those props for possible use in another way later. So
Gotcha.
we'll see what happens. Uh, but yeah, yeah. So definitely some exciting ways to do that, but by not pigeonholing the clues into a specific event all the time, or by not pigeonholing your events in a certain order all the time, you get a lot more flexibility in your storytelling and allows the characters still the option to tell pieces of that story and connect the dots.
Yeah, and that actually ties really nicely into the next point that I want to make. And if we get any questions in the chat there, or if anybody in the chat has questions, feel free to drop them in about the story structure, the arc that I currently have on screen. let us know or about anything. We're monitoring it. Yeah, we got Radgurn and Adgurn, so same dude.
Someone says they think they now know why it's taking forever for the party to be summoned by the Black Staff. I'm just going to say,
It's gonna happen quickly
no,
now.
no, that's the illusion that you think you know why.
But yeah, yeah. That
It's
does
such a
tie
bad
in
deal.
nicely into the next one that we were talking about, or that I wanted to talk about, is the having the highlights fleshed out about what it is you're going to, what your campaign is. Even if you're not going to put them all in a notebook and have it all written out and be, oh, they're going to, have this fight or that fight. Before at the onset, I generally know, like the last campaign I tried to get started and just things kind of fell apart, unfortunately. Was I want it to be a vampire campaign. They're going to be interacting, and there's going to be a big bad vampire. I was kind of writing that by the seat of my pants as we were going, but it's like, oh yeah, I know where this is going to go. I know where the peak, the culmination of this climax is going to be. I know a couple touchstones I want them to go along the way, but for the most part, it was a lot of writing based on what the players do and where they want to go. And I'm very glad that most of them took the bait on the things I wanted them to do, because it's like, oh, we're not going to water deep. Okay, okay, I will write Neverwinter into this or stuff like that.
How have you, because I think part of the story when you're creating the story is, I mean, do you typically map out in advance your antagonist? We're assuming, of course, that the party is the protagonist in every story.
Yes, that's
But
always the assumption I'm running with, is that from their perspective, they're the good guys,
okay.
or they're the heroes of the story. They're not necessarily good guys. That gets on the alignment chart stuff. But in general, they're the protagonist, the people that we're following. They're the main character of the book, and then there's the antagonist, the person who's against them. That is neutral of good and bad, right, wrong, lawful and evil. Completely ignores all of that. That's just the people we care about, the party, and the people that are their foe. The problem is the antagonist, and that allows some creativity there.
So when we talk about antagonists, I think the antagonist is part of the story, and
Oh yeah,
there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can have a different antagonist at each tier level. You can have an antagonist that continues to dog the party throughout until the final culminating event. You could have a variety of antagonists. You've got the main big bad evil bad guy who's the super culminating event, but then you've got some of his lackeys who may be return villains who continue to show up. But then there's more to it than that. Like, well, I mean, like the right hand man of the guy, he may show up, or a different guy who may be unrelated to that bad guy, but who's also bad, lives in the same world, and he's also a pain in the butt. He may show up at tier one. He may not show up at all in tier two. He may make a short return in tier three. That the characters think, now we've got it. It turns out it's somebody else entirely. It's your main bad guy who's going to be in tier four. Something like that
yeah,
is it adds to the story. But what I also find that adds to the story is the villain themselves can't just be, well, it can just be he's bad. Um, I think
yeah.
that limits
I see
some of the
exactly where
opportunity
you're
for
going with that.
clues.
You definitely want to have the villains be believable. That's they have a
Yeah,
goal, they have a reason to do what they're doing. They're not just mustache twirling, tie maidens to railroad track kind of people.
yeah.
I don't know if is that a cultural thing that people still get nowadays. Like, is that?
Ha! I'm going to tie them up on the railroad
Yeah, I
tracks
don't
and
feel
kill
like
them all.
I feel like that was kind of dated when I was when I
Yeah,
was growing up.
back when we got the talkies going, before the talkies took over everything, and then before movies, and then before Twitch destroyed movies, and
Yeah,
television, hey, no, I, I, there's the simple villain who's bad just because he's bad. He's the guy getting paid to do bad things. He's the
yeah,
the low level thug who doesn't think behind, his immediate needs or whoever's paying him to be bad things, and he has no reservations. But you also look at some of the great villains in the movies that are iconic, and you realize that many villains have a story. And I think that I saw this great meme out there that wasn't about humor. What it was is behind every great villain there is a story of tragedy,
yeah,
and that's kind of a, and I hate to use this word in a place that has humans, elves, dwarves, but that's a story of humanity that makes people real. So if you want to, I mean, I can use an example: Darth Vader.
Yeah,
Darth Vader isn't the mustache twirling guy. He is a guy who has experienced a
it's just
great
got a
deal of
mask on.
tragedy. He had a great deal of moral dilemmas, and he made some bad choices, and now he has to live with those. And is he the guy who wakes up and decides to nail a baby to his forehead every day, or is he the guy who's now made choices and now he's making choices within the choices he's already made, the hand that he's dealt himself in many respects as well? Perhaps he's under the gun. Maybe it's a lich who's desperately trying to regain their life back as a human being,
Yeah,
or whatever race they were before.
examining
Uh,
the motivations of your bad guy is super important. Like, why are they terrorizing the countryside to make this thing happen? Why are they serving as the antagonist to your players? If we're talking movies, one of my favorite overarching, mini climaxes and full climax kinds of things is the James Bond franchise. Something like 80% of his foes are tied to Spectre in some capacity, and it's not until he actually gets and meets Blofeld that he's actually dealing a blow to Spectre outright, and everything else is just slight hints, and it's a whole weird, anthology that you really need to dig into to fully understand it, but they're all fully fleshed out. All of their weird, wacky, evil plots make sense when you look at them in the overarching goals that Spectre is trying to do. And this is old school James Bond, not the new Daniel Craig reboot stuff. I didn't watch the new Spectre, so I could be very wrong.
no, you're not. You're not. Actually, the new reboot really nails it very well, actually. And that's also clues, where
Yeah.
they drop clues throughout, and then he figures out what's really going on.
Yeah, so there's the way that I kind of look at it. There's a couple ways that you can do it. You can either have the one overarching bad guy and you slowly work up his trusted lieutenants until you're strong enough to fight him. Okay, you can do that. That's sort of linear, but that's great if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for. Think like Mario, where you have to fight all of Mario's or Bowser's, minions or whatever until you can fight Bowser. One of the ones that I think is really cool though is where you solve a problem, but by solving that problem, it then causes another. There's a warlord that's terrorizing the small town. All right, well we
The
go
trigger.
and yeah, and we
Yeah,
go and
pull the
we
trigger.
stop the warlord, and then all of a sudden doing that has put us at war with his home nation. Well, now we need to go deal with this thing, and doing that you knock over an ancient obelisk and have unleashed 10,000 years of darkness if you don't solve that problem. So having sort of cascading problems up the escalation scale of how big something can be, that's one of the ways that I like going about it, because it doesn't feel like the ending is predictable from the very beginning.
Hmm.
But yeah, let's see. We got talking about motivations. Yeah, one of
Do,
the
do you find it like, because there's also an in between to that? You've got your protagonist, you've got your antagonist. How are you doing your story development with your NPCs, for example?
most of them, it does depend on where they are locally or in the world. If they're in a small farming village, I've used Maple Grove a few times just because that's the town that I built and it doesn't technically fit anywhere in the Forgotten Realms, so I drop it wherever I want it to be. It's small, it's a crossroads town. The people there are isolated from the world, they're somewhat ignorant, they're peasants, so they have peasant problems. Their
I
world,
got fleas.
yeah, they have fleas, they have angry scarecrows, they have goblin attacks. Those are the problems that they have to deal with. And anytime the heroes come back through there, oh hey, you're the heroes. You guys sleep at the inn for free, and blah blah blah. Have all this great stuff. There's not a whole lot of development there, just because there's not a lot of external forces changing things there. If you get to a place like Waterdeep, though, where it's cosmopolitan, it's metropolitan, people are coming and going, changing. It's a very important center of the world. The
Hmm.
NPCs there have to be more involved in the comings and goings of the universe. Not a whole lot's going to change in Maple Grove, but if something happens big in the world, people in Waterdeep are going to know about it. So you kind of have to play into that and change their motivations, shut down the inn if there's a war, shut down the port, shut down gates, give those kinds of hurdles that the players have to overcome based on world events. Whereas a small town doesn't have a whole lot of leeway with what they can do. And then there's everything in between from the two horse town to Waterdeep, but that's generally the scale that I try and play with there. How are you doing that? Keeping your NPCs in as I'm taking notes on your campaigns.
Um, so I've been in a rather unique situation because I'm using as you know, the stuff that we're doing on stream, because I think that's the easiest thing I can discuss that people
Sure.
can then go back and look at as examples is. Um, so when a homebrew campaign, it's one thing, but in a world like Forgotten Realms, Sword Coast or all of Faerun, or
Yeah.
even bigger, all of Toril, with all the continents that are in there, there is, oh gosh, 20, 30 years of information to pull from.
I'd give you
With
40 if you want.
Forgotten Realms, I don't
Yeah.
know if it's that old. I don't. Well, yeah, actually, it is
Yeah.
because it's a yeah.
79 was
I know how
AD&D.
old I am, and I know how old Ed Greenwood's been playing it. It's
I've been
been
working on that,
longer
so
than
it's
I've
gonna.
been. But then you also have several hundred years of very intense lore throughout that has been developed. 100 years worth of story in the story plot
Yeah.
lines and all sorts of stuff in between. So you have a massive variety of characters and NPCs that are already there that I can pick from, and I can create my own as needed as well. So, uh, for example, the Blackstaff. I don't really need to do much to do the Blackstaff except just make sure my voice sounds right. She's already a very well known figure. Her predecessor is just as well known.
Yeah.
The Her predecessor was the husband of who is the current Open Lord of Waterdeep, also a well known NPC. I don't
Great.
have to do much of that. But if we get into uh, uh, Gherkin, the manservant who works at the Happy Axe Beak, or we get into who is it? The the Some of the various people that you met in the Temple of Gond, or uh, some of the other people that you met. My favorite one lately, because it just was very exciting, because it was actually player driven, uh, was Mr. Kincaid from Kincaid's Candles,
God.
because the players definitely wanted to see a candle shop. For some reason, they picked up on something and thought, that's a clue. We should check that out. And they zipped into this candle shop thinking, we're going to find exactly what we need in here. And they ran in, and I had to develop an NPC on the fly. And so, since it's a candle shop, and since there's a guy who paints pictures named Kincaid, uh, I figured what better than to create
The
Kincaid's
painter
candles
of
and watch
light.
my
Like
action
you can
figures.
give yourself full credit for that joke there. That's.
That was the long game right there, my friend.
I'm assuming
And
since episode 1, you've been trying to get us into Kincaid's shop, just praying and
no,
hoping we were
no,
going to get
no,
there.
no, absolutely. Yeah. I wish I had thought of it. I literally had to do that on the fly.
Yep. It,
But then you also have kids that you've met. You've met all the different mercenaries that you hired to get you from Triel or from North Fort all the way up to um, uh,
Waterdeep.
Waterdeep. Oscar Thumbwild, the wizard in the flying ship, his assistant James, who I can't believe I remember that, and their homunculus Higgins. All those
Right.
characters I had to create. But then there were other characters that you interacted with that were already known to be around Daggerford and or uh, Nightstone that I didn't have to create.
Yeah,
They
playing
existed.
in an
They
established
were already
world
in
like
that
that.
area. I just borrowed from them because they weren't dead. Boom. Um, for the person mentioning Violetta, Violetta is actually an NPC. I would love to take credit for Violetta. That was actually originally designed by James Hake, who did a lot of the original writing for some of the stuff. And he wrote an article that showed up, and I'll just say it. It's on D&D Beyond, on some of the other people around Waterdeep. And I'm assuming it's some information that did not make it into the Dragon Heist book, but provided some additional background. I'll give him full credit for Violetta.
Which one was
The
Violetta? Because I'm clearly
Violetta
sitting
was
on a thing
the
that's
Dragonborn High Priestess of Gond. She was
right.
a bronze Dragonborn. He had some great information on her. I just took it, added a little bit more, and went with it.
It worked.
Uh, Go ahead.
I was saying it worked. Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah, it worked beautifully. I mean, the great part about, in my case, the great part about working in an already developed world, for example, is I don't have to completely rebuild everything from scratch.
Yeah.
I have a lot to draw on, and there's some definitely stuff there. Uh, like and Dragon, hey, good to have you in chat. Thanks, glad to have you.
Lycan
Uh,
Dragon.
yeah.
That's just a terrible monster there. I'm gonna go ahead and put that out. That's A were dragon.
A wolf dragon. Why not? Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, that's one of the big hurdles that I'm actually currently facing. Is like I like running in homebrew worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Modern gamers kind of expect like a whole. They expect Forgotten Realms kind of thing where everything is mapped out and built out and all that. It's like I have a village and a hook. Let's go at this, guys. So a lot of my time right now is being spent on building out that and fleshing out that world for the thing that we're running just by ourselves.
Yeah, you don't have to flesh out the whole world, though. I think that's one of the misunderstandings is people think they have to develop an entire universe at once, and they don't. They have to develop what the players know.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Oh, this is a relatively new project, so right now I'm
Yeah.
building a map of the vague region they're in because maps are important and they get a map as their exposit, as their plot hook, get them out the door kind of thing. So it's like, oh, I
Mhm.
need to give them a map.
Off to adventure you go! Out the door!
Let's go.
Yeah.
But that does tie into the idea of building a world, or even if it's an established world, but something that your players can sort of be invested in and be connected to.
Mhm.
Because while everybody, or while a lot of people are, happy, it's like, oh, cool, I show up for Pathfinder Society or D&D Adventurers League, and it's like, hey, this is a canned adventure. This is my person. We go in. Ooh, I'm here. I just showing up means I want to do this, and I'm down for adventure. For a long-term campaign, it's kind of more difficult to build in the player buy-in, and you kind of even if they're saying that they're there, you do have to spend some time as a GM or DM actually kind of making it something that your players do care about. Uh, I've
How
been
have you
parts
done
of
that?
campaigns where people are really, where all the players are super polite and telling the GM that they're into it, but it's just like you've done. We're clearly running off on the thing that you want to do, and none of us care about, but we're still throwing dice, so it's not a bad time. It's just waiting for encounter to encounter. So, what is your method for trying to actually get player engagement, player buy-in, if you would, on their adventures?
Um, it's actually a pretty simple method for the most part. It starts with session zero, and it goes from there, right? Session zero, you guys all wrote up your characters, and I asked for specific uh, information on you guys. We kind of went through some exercises. Remember when we first started that first night? You
Right.
kind of had all these
Yeah.
ideas,
It feels
and
like
then as
four
we went
years
on, I was like,
ago.
I kept asking for more, and then from the information from your character sheets, I'm able to see, everything from your family ties, if you have any, what they are or aren't, some other background history on you guys, what your bonds, your flaws, and other things are, and then from there, I build in things where I can, and then I try to also figure out rotating wise which of the two characters is going to get a spotlight moment. Um, so that they can have that opportunity, once every couple of streams that they're the spotlight if I can do it right. I think one of them was Adgern doing a really funny thing with the wizard hat that he finally got.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. I forgot I got that. Or I forgot
Yeah,
it, but yeah.
yeah, and another spotlight was, for example, Turja talking to her mentor at one time, and then there was another spotlight of recently Zatara, running into her ex-husband, and that became almost a
Yeah, that
one and a
was
half
most of
show
an
event.
episode.
That was a fun episode. I remember
Oh, yeah.
being terrified, even as the DM, talking to her that she was going to kill me personally.
Were we?
Um,
Yeah, yeah. That was that kind of buy-in's huge.
yeah, yeah, and so then also what I did is I also, and this is where I probably go the way extra mile as a dungeon master is I actually go back through the lore and put together this is what you know as a character background pack. So it's
Yeah.
based on a number of factors. First, your where you're from. Well, first your race, then where you're from, then some things about your background and or class that's tied into all that stuff and give you stuff. So you might have a religious understanding of a certain deity that is you, so you know the tenets of your own faith up to a point. If you're a cleric, you may get some additional information on that faith, some deep, rich stuff. Um, and that's so it gives you permission to be knowledgeable about stuff in the world because I gave you that packet. You know about everything in that packet. That doesn't mean you have to tell everybody everything in that packet, but as players, you do.
Yeah, it impacts role play and what
yeah,
what knowledge checks you think you can and can't take. For
yeah.
anybody who hasn't actually looked at these packets, they are in depth. They dig through everything since like playing Adger and Firebeard. He dug through. Reid did lots and lots of legwork there and dug through basically everything that had dwarves in it since 1980. So there's a lot of stuff in there. He definitely did his homework on this. He's not just tooting his own horn. That's yeah. There's a lot in there. And then he talks about magic. He talks about all the various things that my character should know in his universe, which I found is a great refresher because I haven't touched D&D in a decade. So thank you.
Well, the other thing that did is, I think, in terms of a role playing story element, is now you can bring stuff to the story that way as players without fear. Well, if your dungeon master allows you to, anyway. If you have an understanding dungeon master that actually wants that from you guys.
Yeah.
Removing the artificialities that sometimes occur because we have an audience that sometimes also gets to talk to us through chat as we're going as well. The campaign that we run, we don't let the audience, do things that would mess that game up. We're not actually doing that in our particular streams, and that's by design because we want to enjoy our game of D&D and let the audience sit down and watch how we play.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also, those packets they create that immersive effect. But that packet isn't just a packet. I built that packet already understanding that I have a beginning and an end. And it's not just what's in the packet, it's what's not in the packet that also is just as important. And those packets were also based on what your character sheet said that is important to you. So Adgern's character sheet or packet had a very specific item in there that was mentioned. I won't say it on screen. I don't want any spoilers. But also, some of these other things have also been mentioned already in the story. And Adgern has kept a poker face the whole time. So we'll see what happens with that. Then from there, we're going to see how those character sheets play out. So when I create those hooks for the players, what's meaningful to players, it's based on a combination of what the players themselves put in their character sheet to kind of bring this all back around. What they put in their character sheet that matters to them, because they already have an idea of how they want to be a hero or what they're scared of and so on. As well as what's in those packets that say, hey, you might want to be aware that this is important to you too, because it's literally important to all dwarves, or this is important to your faith. You can't just bypass this, or whatever it is.
Well, that's why I worship Abathor. Problem solved. I don't care about rules.
Greedy. But it's not just greed. It's greed it's innovation. It's the impetus for innovation and design.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's in there. The packets, like you mentioned out or reached out to me last week. I think you're like, hey, have you read your packet recently? He's like, I haven't. I need to get back in there. And I was rereading it this weekend, and goodness, there is a lot of stuff in there that's just like, oh yeah, this is very, very nuanced. So I'm gonna have to make it a weekly thing just to dig into it before the streams, just to make sure I'm on the right point, because it's a lot in there. But we have a quick break here. Just talk. We got two 100-bit cheers there from both Kick Up High and Dire Rabbit. Thank you so much. We can't do this without your support, and if it wasn't for you guys, we'd just be talking at each other on Discord. So this is more fun for everybody involved. And I believe that Kick Up High did have a question. It sort of fits into the pacing idea. How do you handle a sluggish party that's not quite accomplishing goals fast enough as a DM or as a fellow party member? For me, and hey Reid, can you move? It looks like you're frozen up.
Yeah, I just leaned over.
Oh, gotcha.
Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, how do you hype chain incoming? Woo woo. How do you handle sluggish parties and all that? For
caffeine.
Yeah, caffeine. There's two ways to look at that, and knowing Kick Up High, I'll go ahead and tee this one off. A stream is not a normal. There are certain rules that we have to abide by that are different than if we're just playing around someone's kitchen table. Because while it is a show and we are technically playing for ourselves, it is still a show, and we do have to keep it interesting to people who aren't playing. So it's less of a huge problem. If you're playing casual games, you're playing games for your private audience. If you're playing games where you're trying to keep the story moving and keeping an audience engaged, There's a lot more stuff juggling there, and I will tee that over to my partner. Reid, what do you got?
Well, actually, it's sometimes you want them to be sluggish and sometimes you don't, but most of the time you don't, especially on a stream. Um, you gotta also remember that the party doesn't want to be sluggish either. They really don't. You can watch when some people are kind of, when I would say watch the party. Um, wow. Hey, Hype Train inbound. Thank you very much, guys. See some subs being gifted. Thanks. Um, back to the conversation at hand. The the uh, the sluggishness can occur when a DM is not providing those hooks in a way that the party knows which way to go, and so or if the party's talking something to death.
Yeah.
So, for example, there hit a point where the party was getting sluggish and something was to death. Well, there was a trigger that was incoming anyway, and hold on, the whole chat just said this chat has become on fire like my shirt. Thank you, chat. I love you guys. Kick
See,
up high, you rock.
I'm not bringing in
And
anything
Dire
into
Rabbit.
that because we've mocked your shirt on stream before, so I feel like you
Oh, you
remember.
can mock all my
Yeah.
shirts. Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind. You know. And Dire Rabbit, thank you so much for those gift subs.
And we also missed,
So,
I believe, Corey cheering some bits there. So, Mr.
oh,
Smithwick, thank you so
Corey,
much.
big thank you, big thank you. So, the thing is, you can have things occur. So, I had an explosion occur in a library. Now that was being triggered anyway, but it hit a point where the party was getting sluggish. Now is the time to go ahead and drop that literal explosion, if I were, into the party's plans. That forced a party to take an action. Now, it doesn't always have to be a weapon of mass destruction type action. It could be a message arrives. It could be um, suddenly something isn't right. Someone gets ill, or there's a mini encounter. They see someone get robbed on the street, and then they see the burglar running away. They could chase the burglar down, and hey, and then when that occurs, it's like a little mini pulse of action that might need to be injected. So I always have like a little chest of mini uh, encounters that can occur in various environments that will allow a sluggish party to get pumped back up and stuff like that. And I don't, from a purely a DM perspective, I don't do that for a stream reason, although it's beneficial to the stream. I do
Yeah.
that because it just keeps the party engaged. Uh,
Yeah, and one of the things that as a DM, having the slow meetings is kind of worthwhile because that ties back to the, hey, while a lot of players aren't, or some players aren't very comfortable taking the reins and making big decisions and all that, but you do have to give those players a spotlight periodically.
mhm.
Share the spotlight with everybody's like, hey, right now it's Greg's turn to do this. You don't sit down around the table and say this, but it's like, her, I have this set up where Greg has been kind of quiet at the table. Greg's taking the lead on this. Let's see what we can do here. And if that person is not comfortable or isn't very well versed in making things move quickly, things are going to move a little bit slower. Things are going to be a little more sluggish. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Uh, it's definitely worthwhile thinking, afterwards talking to them, like, hey, these are the things that we were working on. I noticed that you were having some hesitancy on getting things going here. Are you comfortable with me putting, thrusting decisions on you like that, or would you like me to try and figure out other ways to get you engaged, or how can I get you engaged, kinds of things if it becomes a recurring problem.
Hmm.
But some slow is nice because if you're just mile a minute, pedal to the metal all the time, that gets old very very fast.
I agree. What has been the challenge for you in terms of getting hooks developed in the first place? How do you develop your hooks?
It depends on where we are in the campaign or where we are so far in the adventure. If we're relatively young in the adventure, we're just getting started. It's usually going to be some external force. It's going to be the long, forgotten relative bequeaths you this treasure map in their will. The guard comes and requests help. Uh, there's a wanted poster and you feel like you need some cash, kind of thing. That kind of stuff is it's kind of simple. It's easy to get it going, but in a session one, people notice that they're trying. People know that they're trying to get themselves going. For later sort of mid-adventure hooks, it gets a lot harder. And I know that's one of my shortcomings there, so I ask my players to please, if I dance out naked in front of you holding a neon sign that says "Adventure this way," please bite that. Subtle hooks is not my not exactly my subtlety there, but I try to drop recurring hints. For instance, if like with the vampire campaign, I had a whole series of things planned where they would hear rumors about, hey, this region is bad, or they'll meet people that are going to this region over here. You'll meet merchants that are missing on the road to that area. And it wouldn't be all rapid fire like that. It would be sort of intrigue. You pull at any of these threads, and it's still going to tie you back to Castle Dracula. It's always going to get you back there, but I need to hope that they're going to pull on one of them and not go talk to Boblin the Goblin. And that's just the perpetual fight we have when we're dealing with with NPCs and players that find those NPCs far more interesting than I thought they would be. Wow, we are. Thank you so much, everybody. This is insane out there.
Is it really kicking off?
Yeah, there's. I don't know how to look at the hype train thing, but yeah, we have quite a bit of cheers going on there. Vasha Stampede, thank you so much. And I'm hoping I'm not missing anybody. This is all going into what the tavern upkeep area, the tip of the wench kind of things.
Yeah, looks like it. So I think we're already getting in really good for the goal for the week already. We're really doing well. Thank you guys so much. That upkeep helps us build the stream and improve it further. So the things that actually gets applied to is almost always improvements to the show. So
the Buy Reid Better Shirts Fund. That's
I will say that no funds were used to harm Reid shirts at any point in time. Reid shirts were all Reid's choice. He made them all on his own a long time ago, because most of these shirts I've had since I want to say since 2005. So I love them.
I'm not going to lie, I did have a really nice Hawaiian shirt or Tongan shirt collection made of some material I didn't know. And then I washed them, and now they fit teddy bears. So it's
well, you can't
tragic.
go wrong there.
Yeah.
You just can't.
But it's 8 o'clock. We've been talking for about an hour here. I think it might be worthwhile for us to go ahead and take a short break. Give everybody out in the chat a little bit of time away from us for a minute, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. That work for you over there?
That works for me, man. Let's do it.
All right. Well, everybody out in the chat, thank you so much for your support. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm
Hey,
still
hey.
Mac, still joined here by Reid. And
I'm still here, Reid.
yep, still here, Reid. And thank
Hmm.
you everyone for participating in that heist. It looks like it went poorly. I think is reading the chat there. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
but anyway. So we're talking right now. We've just talked about how to build a story, how to sort of engage your players, having the ideas and stuff fleshed out vaguely before you go ahead, but giving lots of room for lateral play. That flexibility, though, only goes so far. There is some rigidity you need when you're building encounters. Uh, I know there's a meme flying around right now where someone, and I think it's the Gaston steals somebody's book and looks at it. It's like, there's no Dungeons or Dragons at all. It's all math. Yes, yes, it is. Uh, so, welcome to the math side of the program, guys, as we watch our viewership plummet. Uh,
No,
yeah,
no.
it's it's much smoother than that. Uh, you need to know what you're doing when you build a dungeon. I do know a couple people who've been able to do dungeons on the fly and wing it, but they've been GMing since Gygax was 30. So like they've got plenty of time going on, plenty of time under their belt there to know what they're doing on there. So there's a couple
Hmm.
really big things we need to talk about for dungeons. One of them is the scope. What's your time frame that you have to what they're doing, the exposition of the dungeon and the actual physical layout, and what you populate the dungeon with. But before you hear me talk about all that one, Reid, where are you looking at for when you have to build a dungeon for whether it's Whiskey Magic and Destruction, or you're helping Cecil build his, or you're just building something for a one shot because you're bored and you're putting together a book of dungeons? What are some of the factors that you're taking into account when you're crafting these things? And for everyone out there, I'm sorry, a dungeon doesn't necessarily have to be something underground. It's an encounter that's sort of bottled, where people aren't coming and going as they please. It's sort of it doesn't necessarily have to be a dungeon or underground. It can just be a building. It can be a town. It can be something out in the wild. It's a series of linked encounters kind of thing, if that makes sense. So when you're building your more complex encounters, Reid, what are the factors you're taking into account there?
So there's a couple things. It depends on. There's a few things I think about. So there's session time, right? So that'll determine a lot with uh, how long I know that that particular encounter is going to need to take, or how many sessions that encounter is going to need to take. So is this a extensive dungeon delving kind of thing, or is this raiding the bad guys uh, village and then honing in further onto his keep and how are we infiltrating that keep and getting in, or is this running around through the dwarven forges? You've got spoiled for choices in terms of encounter development and stuff like that. But I'll say this: there are some things that I'm not a fan of when it comes to video games and some of the things that you can do with those, and as they get pulled into a tabletop game. But I will say that with level development, especially for MMORPGs and or especially a lot of very advanced online RPGs or first person shooters, level development has created a huge opportunity for looking differently at how we develop uh, dungeons in our games. And I don't mean like, you found a medical kit, you're healed, ta-da! I mean things like uh, how many ways in and out is a very, very simple question you should be asking. If there's only one way in and one way out, and it's the same, or one way in and a different way out, you've created either a pit or a linear encounter.
Yeah.
Um, if it's a very large, and you do that, it's a tool, right? So you got to look at it like tools in the toolbox. So sometimes you want linear, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want the illusion of not linear, even though it really is. And you create plot devices to create that effect, right? And I think we'll pull up an example here in a minute.
Yeah.
But then, I used to do some video game design, or not video game design. I used to do some level development for a game called Command and Conquer, and there were some very good designer notes in terms of what makes a good design versus what doesn't. And usually, you want three ways in or out. You should not have a single choke point for anything that you're doing, unless it absolutely is necessary as part of the plot device, right?
Yeah. And on that
So,
note, I'm bringing it up right now on the stream to
mhm.
see if this translates well. It did. Hey, I covered up our logo, but whatever. So this is a dungeon you ran us through. It was too
Yes.
small if I did anything else.
No, that's beautiful. That's
So this is the
beautiful.
dungeon you ran us through off stream to help to build some cohesion with the units and or the teams and do all that. And it was an interesting way to build a dungeon. I thought it worked pretty well.
Believe it or not, that was also a dungeon that you did on stream. You just didn't realize.
Yeah, we turned left as opposed to going right and went out the entrance and yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well, you
it,
went in a different way. So this dungeon looks, as a encounter that was only supposed to take. I think this encounter took all of 2 hours.
yeah, I
Uh,
think once we actually got in the sewer, it took about 2 hours.
yeah. When you saw it, you said, "Wow, that's actually a pretty complex." And I was like, "No, it's actually linear as can be. You just didn't realize it." Now I can make it more complex by allowing you to go certain directions, but there were plot devices that prevented that. Um, the reason
Are
this
gates
particular
plot devices now?
gates are more than plot devices, but yes, they can be. They can be plot reasons why you can't go past a certain point. But also, you in this particular encounter, we'll say that this is the sewer encounter where the Kinku attacked you above ground and then were running away.
Yeah.
And then later on, you guys chased the Kinku, and he met with some people and then ran further. Um, there are some things that are not on this map that were discussed, but that was also me telling story as well as you guys moved through to add some depth to it. You guys did not have this map in front of you, so you had no way to know what was really coming. And this is actually an after effect where I added notes on where certain things happen because this map will also be available probably not too long in the next day or so to our Patreon patrons, so
Oh,
they
that
can
yeah.
use that as their own encounter as well. So
Or they
just
just
throwing
want
that
to see
out there.
if they just want to see behind the scenes, look behind the curtain kind of thing.
Yeah, they'll
See
be
how
able
we
to
build a
actually
case.
see this map very clearly and some additional notes on this map as well. But where the entrance point is where you can see number one at the very northern central hallway there. That's the entry point. And you were chasing a Kinku who had escaped with something valuable to you. That was kind of a necessity to get you to run after them. The Kinku had to steal something valuable off you. Luckily, the rolls came out right. And the Kinku was able to get a hold of something. And then you guys chased him through. And then luckily, one of the characters wounded this Kinku on the way out. So when you lost track of the Kinku, guess what you could do? Trace after the blood. So now you're under duress because something you wanted that was very valuable is in possession of this Kinku. You got to a point where you were able to sneak up where the Kinku was talking to someone else. Um, the the other thing you were introduced to is I think in room number 7 there in the central part of the map is a big square room with number 7.
Yeah.
That black dot represented a large 6-ton iron ball that are being pushed around either by the whatever's groups are used to clean the sewers or whatever, but I explained it there as opposed to later
Yeah.
because later on as you guys move through you get to this point where this 6-ton iron ball is now running down the corridor after you. If I had to explain what this thing was then, it would have taken away from some of the urgency. So having a plot device to explain something before the characters actually get into a situation where that 6-ton ball of iron matters, kind of important. So
That is something
and
you
then
do
they
really well with your dungeons. Actually, sort of build the pacing and make sure that there's sort of a clock that the players are on. Make sure keep them going, so they're not going to just sit around and stare at a brick wall for hours.
Yeah, I do try to think about those things because there is always a time limit. And the other thing I will say is this particular dungeon also uses what's called the 5-room theory. So the 5-room theory is about what you need for even without a time pressure being involved. Basically, in a 3-hour game session, you can get through about 5 rooms of a dungeon
Yeah, 5
or
smaller
5 rooms of a
encounters. Yeah.
exploratory situation where where the characters feel like they're in danger at that moment. So you get about 5 rooms of space there. Um, In this particular scenario, they did not explore rooms 4, 5, and 7. I believe it's 5 up there. Yeah.
Yeah, something like
4,
that.
5, and 7 were not part of it, nor was room 3 at the very end where they would have found a body had they continued on.
Oh, I missed a body? Damn.
Believe me, you were putting plenty of extra bodies in the sewer yourselves. I don't think you needed to find yet another one. Um, the So with that map, you guys then trailed from room 7 down through the corridor, of corridor 10. You were either going to set off the trap, or in your case, you actually tried to use a fire thing, which wound up setting off the sewer gas in the area because you rolled a 1. Remember, we talked
Yeah,
about that.
it still worked. I'm going to point out that the guy was still on fire. So,
Oh,
problem
yeah.
solved.
Everybody was on fire at that point, and it's prematurely set off an explosive, uh, smoke powder explosive that released the 6-ton iron ball that then went like Indiana Jones down the corridor
Yeah.
with a huge putrescent pile of sewage behind it, where 3 of the 4 characters then went into through the iron gate opening at the bottom and saved themselves, while Adgern stayed sewage free on top. That is where the players screwed me. That is where the players did something unexpected, and you need to roll with it. And unfortunately, there was consequences of that, because what they wound up going up against that was premature was the troll, Vold Vomit Guts, that's in this sewer area. And with 3 players, I mean, it was already deadly at 4 players. With 3 players, it's insane. So the optional Sturge attack that you'll also see in the notes there didn't happen in this encounter because they didn't need to be bled further before engaging the troll. Okay, the Sturge attack is there for 2 things. One, if the player party is already a little too strong, it gives me an option to kind of bleed them down a little bit to make sure that the players are actually probably going to be in more danger. It creates a little more tension as well. In addition to that, it also creates something else that can create action to move the players even further. Now they're under more time pressure if they weren't under enough already.
Yeah, you don't want to be attacked by these mosquito bat monsters for too long. So
yeah. So in this case, it wasn't a necessity. It didn't need to happen, so I skipped it. When we did another version of this, just for funsies on the backside, you guys got to experience the hell that is those Sturges.
Yeah, those sound awful.
Yeah, they were awful. And but luckily, you guys didn't have to deal with it in this thing. However, now with only 3 player characters and a 6-ton iron ball blocking Adgern from going to help his friends, they're now stuck in a locked area in sewage where the troll could come up and attack it. And if it wasn't for, again, the players having a third alternative of picking a lock as opposed to fighting this beast and getting away, they probably would have been mauled to pieces by that troll.
Yeah,
they were already hurting pretty bad when they got out of there. But luckily, they made some decisions that bought them some time and then also allowed them to unlock the gate. So,
yeah,
purely.
This was what, 2-3 weeks ago that we did this on the stream. So if people want to watch, go back into our videos on demand, or it might be on YouTube at this point. But go and check out how Reid's dungeon actually played out. There was a lot of really interesting, from the player perspective here, it didn't feel like we were being railroaded down an area. It didn't feel like we were artificially being moved to keep us in the time limit. It just flowed naturally. He did a really good job on this dungeon.
And there was a cliffhanger right at the end, just as you crossed through the cage, and that just worked out beautifully.
Yeah, it was fantastic timing. And all of the subtle plot hooks that came out of there. So it was a well-run dungeon. So there was about 3 to 5 things in there that we had to end up doing. So that fits perfectly into that 3 to 5 method thing.
The 5-room system.
Yeah, 5-room system. I did that once when DM Cicero had to take a weekend or a week off. Covered that with the Velkin Weave there. But that was how I try to build it when I'm building one-shots. If I'm actually building the one-shots, otherwise it's just like, have all the rooms. Just keep rooms. Keep getting them in. All right, we can get rid of that. There we go.
And if you watch some of the one-shots that you've already done with the Tomb of Horrors, you'll look that adage has proven true consistently with each session. Yeah. We've gotten through about 5 5 rooms before we really are running out of time per session.
And a lot of those rooms are things you guys decide to do yourself, like jump into the stupid portable hole and end up in the treasure chest like jerks.
Yeah, again, players never underestimate the players' cunning to leverage mechanics
Absolutely.
and role play options to make it work. Which, frankly, after we had wound up where we were, I was like, "Oh crap!" But like, Josh playing his character says, "Oh no, we're only just beginning to explore options," and then we just happen to have the right stuff to keep us alive for an extended period of time while we're dumping stuff out of this. So it's like, it's pretty entertaining to say the least.
I was trying so hard to kill everybody, and you just missed like a couple keywords. But but anyway, so 3 to 5 encounters is generally where I try to do it. If it's a more complex puzzle, I assume that they're not going to get the puzzle. That's just a thing when I'm writing modules, when I'm writing dungeons. I'm going to assume that the time it would take me to figure out the puzzle that I wrote is probably a third the time it's going to take the players to figure it out, because I decided this weird random chain of logic that's clearly very logical, and you look at this makes a lot of sense. There's the key on the hook behind the thing. Why are they not looking there? But you got to remember, your players aren't running at the same wavelength as you are. They're not running on the same weird thought pattern that you are. You mentioned the video games earlier. For puzzles, honestly, if you look at like mid-90s to early 2000s weird point-and-click adventure games, and then try and figure out the weird train of logic that the game designers were doing, that's you. That's if you're designing puzzles that are totally obvious, totally clear, why are they not figuring this out? It's because they're not jumping on this weird train of logic that you have. So build extra time into that, and don't be afraid to
build clues.
Yeah, clues. Don't throw exactly where I was going with that. Don't be afraid to throw in some clues. Be like, oh yeah, as you dig further on this thing, you recognize that the lock is brass, and there was a brass cupboard. Period. Whatever things you have to do, just sort of highlight that. Hey, maybe check out this thing over here to get them going. Works really well. But you need to know what kind of time limit you're working with. If you're working one shots, that's a much more specific time limit because you have to get it done in a session. Maybe 2. If you do longer than 2, you've lied to your players. Sorry, guys. So it's everybody's time is very valuable. So you want to make sure that you get them through the stuff that you're trying to get them through in the time limit that you told them you were going to get it through. If you're doing a long, contiguous campaign, you can be a little bit more flexible about it. But even then, you still want to try and have this is the problem that we were told to solve at the beginning, and sort of have some kind of resolution or movement towards a resolution by the end. Following back up an hour ago when we were talking about the story arc. You want to apply a story arc to your dungeons, not quite as rigidly to the story arc, but you do want to have some kind of, they're making progress, they're learning things, they're getting where they're going. If your group likes getting lost in details, like they like to explore the library, you better have a handful of book titles to give them.
There's actually a great website for that. I'll see what I can do to post that in the follow-up notes.
Excellent. That does tie to something I was going to have at the very end. It's on the shelf. Darn it. No, it's really behind me. Anyway, the Dungeon Master's Guide has everything you could possibly want for building random nonsense in your rooms. There's build your encounters, build them based on what kind of room you're in, build them based on what kind of environment you're in, based on level or what kind of monsters you think would be fitting in there. There's tables for everything in the Dungeon Master's Guide. If you are a Dungeon Master or a Game Master, you should read your source book to the fullest. Every game has something in there that is a sort of a cheat crutch for you, right? I can't think of any that actually fit there, Reid, that don't have some kind of a random generator, effectively. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, but most of them want to have good sessions so that people keep buying their books.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's generators. You should also sprinkle in a few things that you know that they should find as well. So
yeah, I'm not a fan of random dungeons personally, but if I need to fill in random fluff or random, there's charts for all. The background charts are something I have leaned on. So I believe it's Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a "This is your background." I've done that for a couple different like NPC guys who are in a dungeon. I'd strip out a lot of the options, but I still play with that a little bit to be like, oh, this is why this guy is fighting with this weird lich guy. Or this is why this thing is happening in this universe. There was a DCC one-shot we did, I don't know, 4 years ago at this point. I don't know, what time is meaningless. But there was a DCC one-shot that I actually used the Xanathar's Guide to build the motivations of several of the NPCs that they interacted with. Mind you, it was a barbarian horde and basically a god, but whatever, hey, they met them. So being able to use the random sources you have are simply invaluable. Another point that I think is really kind of important is why a dungeon exists. For the stuff that you kicked out there, Reid, that's actually really kind of self-explanatory, because that was the sewers of Waterdeep, if I'm not misunderstanding or misremembering that, right?
Yeah, that sewer can be used for any sewer, to be honest, the map can. But yeah, for that purposes of that encounter, it was a sewers of Waterdeep kind of situation. Yeah.
And everything that we encountered in there tied very well into this is a sewer.
It had to make sense. Yeah.
And making sense is huge.
I will say the latest tool I've been using to do that has been, strangely, the new encounter builder on D&D Beyond.
I haven't played around with that yet. That's worthwhile?
Oh, absolutely. As a dungeon master, if you're doing development, it has a lot of value. As a matter of fact, I can even link some of those at some point.
I think
I'll throw them on the Patreon. I'll throw them on the Patreon as well, and because I can take the encounter builder encounters and actually make it public so people can see them. So, for example, this one was called "Chase Through the Sewers and Getting Trolled." This is the original map actually right here. So, "Chase Through the Sewers and Getting Trolled" was the encounter. The one where you guys were in the Temple of Gond fighting off whatever the heck those mechanical things were. That one was called Good Gond. What the hell are those things? And those encounters are built on stuff that has to match. So that encounter builder will let me look things up. So in the Gond encounter, I've never really did anything with constructs. It was an idea that if they're in the Temple of Gond and they needed to deal with something in the library, I could do paper golems and other sorts of fluffy stuff like that, but it's the Gond temple. So if it had been the Temple of Agma, paper golems would have made sense. But in the Temple of Gond, I wanted something more constructs based. So
that makes sense.
I literally selected constructs along with whatever it is that you guys were dealing with that you didn't see in the library, and set some stuff up, and there it went. And that allowed me to select the right constructs for the party to fight that made sense story-wise, or that I could reskin a certain way story-wise. And at the same time, the encounter builder also takes into account the number of party members and the level of party members, and then tells me what level of difficulty that's going to be for them.
Does the encounter builder include any map assets on there, or be like, hey, this is how the map can look out, or is it just?
No, it's strictly the fight, and then I write up a bunch of notes because it has room for the title, a quick synopsis, and then an actual write up of how you want the encounter to go. So you have it as a tool as a dungeon master to reference, and that's been pretty good. So I think it's easy, medium, hard. Deadly, and then if they ever increase it to Mack level, it'll have Blender with Liquify.
So you say that, but my dungeons are pretty tame. I'm not proud to say.
Yeah. So the Getting Trolled one was set to Deadly. The 6 Kenku Can Kill, which is the 6 Kenku who tried to mug you. That's actually a separate encounter. I linked them.
Okay.
Because I'd already built them, but I needed something that would cause you to run through the sewers after them and discover some other clues, which you discovered.
I feel we did good on the clue hunt there.
Yeah, you think you did. Anyway, that's because I never give anything away. The 6 Kenku Can Kill is not a deadly encounter for you guys. It was not deadly.
Not at all.
It was not easy. It was a plot device encounter. that created, some of the dirty. It helps you see some of the dirty ways that the people in the city can mess with you. And besides that, you weren't wearing armor that day. It was great. None of you were.
I never
It was fantastic.
I played a dwarf, rogue.
Yeah.
Or wizard.
Yeah, and you're right. Chat is Mack is definitely all about the level that is above deadly called blender.
One day, like if
he looks at the party and just asks, "Will it blend?"
Yeah. If people are curious, I don't use fancy encounter builders or anything. I play a la 1970. Like that's me building maps. This is me building encounters. Like it's analog and it's bad. I need to get brought kicking and screaming.
I'll get you teched up, bro. I'll get you teched up. We'll get you squared away. And then, by dialing in easy or deadly, it helps me set my encounter pacing as well. And then also at deadly doesn't mean I have to throw everything at you at once. Deadly means that it's deadly if I throw everything at you at once, and I can dial in an order and have that stuff preset. The Manchun encounter, where you guys discovered that Simulacrum was also deadly, but it was only deadly if I threw everything at you at once. It was still dangerous. People still went down.
Yeah.
There was definitely some tension there. But it wasn't
one of the things I honestly kind of overlooked was if you're building encounters, don't go by gut. Don't think this thing is super. No, I got this. I know how a deadly encounter is. I'm going to point over there because that's where my DMG is. But the Dungeons Master's Guide has a building encounters. I believe it's by experience level or experience points worth a couple modifiers, depending how many monsters, how many players you have. And there's a tier for every level and then all 5 types with the multiplier on there. Use that. It's a lot of math, but it's balanced. It's shocking.
Well, that's what the encounter builder actually does for you.
Okay.
So, it takes all that math and it chucks it up, and then I get a nice little barcode, color code that says, hey, deadly. All right, I've achieved deadly. Not quite blender, but deadly.
That feels that feels cheaty to me. Like
it's the same thing, but instead of having to do all that stuff manually, I have a system that does it quickly for me, so I can get back to running the game or writing more story. So it's a time saver for me.
I don't know what to do with all my free time. Like I don't know, more owlbear art, I guess.
As R. Klein has mentioned numerous jokes, when people have tried to open up my Dungeon Master's binder, all they've found are the words "sexy goblin" inside, and there's nothing else.
Yeah,
and that's
just the word.
Not necessarily untrue. So the other thing I'll mention is we've talked about linear and setting up for the encounter, but when we're talking about a bigger dungeon as part of a story, I mentioned something about having more than one way in and out. I'd like to specifically bring up something that I actually found on, it's a website called the Alexandrian.
Okay.
It's on alexandrian.net, thealexandrian.net. And I'm going to post in chat through the Games Tavern. That's the first link to a story called, not a story, but a series of 4 posts that talk about Jaquaying. It's a method that he coined the phrase from, Jaquaying method of dungeon design, and it's based on Janelle Jaquays, who has written quite a few adventures for various different tabletop game companies, but also did stuff for Halo Wars and some other video games as well. And those same processes and methods work well in tabletop level design when you're building like an area like a dungeon, because dungeons are, for lack of a better term, the equivalent thing of a level design when you're doing various things in video games. So what she postulates in some other essays herself, for example in Caverns of Thracia, 3 separate entrances to the first level of the dungeon. And then from level 1 of the dungeon, you'll find 2 conventional paths and no less than 8 unconventional or secret paths leading down to the lower levels. And that's just the beginning at level 1 of multiple levels which come about. So the concept is some things are easy to find, some things are interesting to find, but what it also does is it gives room for the characters to shine, to figure out alternatives, and to really explore the dungeon, just like your real life situations are. And I have a large background in also tactical tabletop, not tactical tabletop, but tactical war game design for uh, Department of Defense and Army and stuff like that too. You can't just have a railroaded solution. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Well, I was in the Army. I mean, it's no
No,
secret that I was.
I got you. Yeah.
I mean, I got really long hair now, and this is only because my son has really long hair, and I want to be like him. So Ryan, when you get your hair cut in the front, so will your dad. So there.
I think he's trying to make you look like the Fonz. Like that's where that's.
No, he's not doing this to me. I'm doing this to him. I'm gonna walk around and look like an idiot everywhere where I go until he gets a good haircut.
The hair is the reason why
Yeah,
that's happening.
yeah, yeah. The hair's the reason. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I got you.
Mac, I love you, buddy.
That's not what I said.
So, what I'll mention is if you start with that article I just posted in chat, and we'll have that also linked on for this when it goes on to other social media. Start with that. Read all 4 articles. They're very well written. The writer is what's the writer's name? Hang on, I'll pull up the writer. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, it'll be there.
Yeah, Justin Alexander. That's the guy who actually did it. Justin Alexander. Justin Alexander writes a really good series on this with 4 parts. Highly recommend reading it. I only discovered it this year. It was some things I was kind of already doing, but by seeing how he wrote it out, I've kind of upped my game a little bit. And then if you read some of the essays that Janelle has put out as well, Janelle Jaquez actually writes a really good series of things if you feel like getting into it, of how these things can be. I'm not afraid to look at various different video game designers and say, what can I pull from this and leverage in it? Just as much as I'm not afraid to pull war game design practices for things like triggers that activate certain encounters. So I look at triggers and I go with that and I make that magic happen. I mean, do you use triggers on any of your stuff?
I tend to, yeah. There are actually a couple different tiers of triggers that I try to use. There's the plot triggers where the thing is going to happen. The king is going to send someone to summon the people, regardless of where they are in the city and regardless of what they've happened. It's going to happen on Wednesday, full stop. Then there's a couple other ones that are more nitty gritty. If on the way here they stopped and they helped the peasant with the broken wheel, okay, they're going to be they're going to not meet the problem of the angry person that is missing their potato shipment or whatever the person was shipping. And then there's things where if they do X thing in a very nitty-gritty combat scenario, like they do use fire, things are going to be aflame and they're going to lose a lot of they're going to lose some clues. So there's 3 major tiers of things that have to happen, things that if they touch it, if they do something there, it will affect how things are going to play out, and things that are on the smaller scale of if they do something, there's consequences to how this is going to go. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that, but those are typically the 3 ways I try to do things.
How much in advance do you plan some of your triggers versus, some of the triggers I think you kind of figure out on the fly? I think we all do. If you've got any, you're going to have to do some of it on the fly because you can't prepare for everything.
Oh yeah, no.
But in your case, like how far in advance do you do some of that?
If I design an encounter that is a meaningful, like sort of plot encounter, I try to include something in there where whatever they do at the encounter is going to impact stuff later. So if it's I have them chasing across the country or going into a tomb to find this long lost artifact, surprise, it's susceptible to fire. So if you use a fireball to clear out the room, you've destroyed the artifact or you've greatly damaged it, and then they have to deal with that way to do it. Or if something along the lines of if I'm building something where they are interacting with a large merchants guild and they decide to try and force their way in, and they do an intimidation check and it goes sour, everything that they do from now on with that guild is going to be at a 10% increase because the guild doesn't like them and it gets passed around. But as far as
What clues do you give the players that they know that that's linked to them being, jerks or something, or doing something?
for that specific one, it would be something along the lines like, "Oh, you guys again," or some NPC being gruff and angry with them when they interact. The first one or two times that they're talking to the merchants, they might not get it. They might just think that oh, Mack is being an asshole with that. If they get inside the room, they'll see a "do not serve" or a the people we don't want board. Or if they put the piece together, or they talk to hey, why are you guys being jerks about this? Be like, oh, because you guys threatened our people 2 towns over. Yeah, we're not going to give you the best discounts ever. The reveal depends on how the players are going to try and pick at that scab and figure out why there are issues there. But that does tie, and this is a question I was actually way back in the chat, and I got on my telephone, someone telling me that I missed it. This is from Dire Rabbit. Is what's the best, coolest, most unexpected plot reveal you've experienced as a player or that you facilitated as a GM? That's a hard one because most of the ones I do, I try to actually tie into. I try to tie into the plot there. So if the players aren't paying attention, it'll be a shocking reveal. But I also like to think that I'm doing, it's like, oh, hey, check out all this foreshadowing that I'm dropping around. And most people kind of miss that, unfortunately. I think the most exciting one I've been on the player end of things, though. I was playing the Reign of Winter Pathfinder campaign. And we ended up, we start in some weird fantasy world that the Pathfinder universe is. There's something where winter's a problem. Baba Yaga is there. We need to go save Baba Yaga, I think. And then we ended up in 1918 Russia. Full, like, not hyperbole, not analog there. That was, we ended up in 1918 Russia and had to go fight Rasputin. It was weird. It was shocking watching everybody figure out what is happening here. That was a huge reveal for us to figure out how that plays. So that was probably the single biggest, hey, what now moment I've ever had in gaming.
That doesn't sound like a plot reveal. That sounds like a giant plot twist.
Well, when we went back and actually looked at it, it did line up. It fit. Because we were chasing Baba Yaga, and it's like, oh, well, it's clearly just a different Baba Yaga. No, it was Baba Yaga from Russian folklore, and there were a couple artifacts that we saw that were other things that from Russian history, and we just didn't put 2 and 2 together, and we had 3 people who had studied Russian language in the room, and just none of us, it didn't click at all. Until finally it's like, oh.
We're gonna tussle with Rasputin.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was actually when we showed up and met the Vickers machine gun. That it's like, that doesn't do well at all. I had a druid that just didn't. He didn't survive that encounter. But yeah.
All that metal
So
slamming into him at high speed.
Yeah. That's probably the most wild moment I've had. I don't know. Do you have any exciting, crazy moments there on your end there, Reid?
As a forever DM, it's kind of hard to get playtime to have those moments.
We try to invite you to things.
Huh?
We try to invite you to things to try and break you out of that mold.
Yeah, but it's one of those things like ongoing campaigns long enough to actually get to a real good plot twist with my characters.
I drop plot twist out the gate. Surprise!
You drop what?
I drop plot twists out the gate. Surprise! You're not actually here. I lied to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think some of the ones where I've had traitors in my midst and didn't realize it. Someone was working me the whole time in one game. That was an interesting one. It's a oh no. And then in one case, I think another plot twist was not only was my wife not dead in a game, but she was now actively working to kill me and was working for the big bad evil bad guy. I think that was an interesting one.
Yeah, that's awful.
And then or that someone else was setting us up for being robbed. That was another good one.
Yeah, betrayal is always a really nice one to put in there, especially if it's like, oh, I sent you, more than just I sent you to your death because you were random adventurers, but you actually have a good way to build in the betrayal. That stuff's great. I love that.
Yeah, and Dire Rabbit, did I deserve it? No, I did not. I was a good character, and
Have
my
we met
character
all
was
the characters we
distraught
picked?
until he realized his wife was alive. But then he was distraught when he realized his wife was trying to kill him this whole time because she's evil.
I mean, was it him
So
or the one-armed man?
we won't get into the one-armed man because that could be a plot reveal on
Oh no,
accident.
I'm sorry. That was a fugitive reference. My bad.
Yeah, I know what you
Yeah,
mean.
yeah, yeah. Actually, it
But
was a mask referencing the fugitive, but yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, Yeah, that's, I mean, so you can do that, or you can have it where the big bad evil bad guy is not really who you thought he was, and it turns out it was someone else, or the big bad evil bad guy has actually got a tragic story that the characters could sympathize with and actually could help the big bad evil bad guy
I love sympathetic bad guys.
at,
That's
at the tier to that. Yeah, it makes you feel bad for killing him sometimes too, you know.
ooh, but he has such nice stuff. But ooh, but
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get into this. If you read into the Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft, there's things that make him truly evil. At the end of the day, he made some evil decisions, some vicious, selfish decisions.
yeah,
But then you realize the tragedy of why he made those decisions and how it continued to get worse and worse and worse as he made bad decision after bad decision.
yeah. We're
For the
we're getting a call
reasons
for no Strahd spoilers. I know a couple people in our chat are on a
Ah,
Strahd
oh,
campaign.
okay. So, but he makes it as a bad guy. He makes a series of bad
Yeah,
decisions
Strahd is a
that
very
get
very
to the
complex
plot
bad
points in
guy.
the first place. Yeah. The original Ravenloft still the same thing. The story really hasn't changed that much. They've just added more detail
It's
and a lot
40
more
years
back.
old.
Yeah. Um, I will say that there is one other person I'd like to mention when we get into dungeon stuff
Yeah,
specifically.
I think that's actually where we're kicking off to right now. Let's because we're wrapping up on 8:45 here, and this can go on for hours. I think if we get too sidebarred. So let's roll
Yeah.
back into
So
dungeons.
Sly Flourish has some great articles out there. I'm about to drop one into the chat using the Games Tavern. Um, he created an article called "Making Awesome Dungeons." He he really under. I mean, it's 50% of the title of the game, as he mentions in the very first sentence. It's a very good article.
Yeah,
He has some good insights. He has some different methods necessarily. I know the guy behind it. He's a really great guy. He understands the ways to do some of this stuff. Highly recommend doing some reading on some of his stuff as well. Some great insights, some tools for the toolbox, if you will, that may
yeah.
work really well for you.
When I look at that, when I have to write one shots or I have to write dungeons, this is actually one of the things that's favorited, bookmarked on my computer, whatever it is that Chrome uses. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
this is one of my go-tos of I just want a refresher when I'm haven't been in it for a couple weeks, just to be like, oh yeah, there we go. So Sly Fursh's work is fantastic. I've read a lot of
Yeah.
it. He links to a lot of
Um,
other people, which I didn't realize at the time, and I actually reached out to him on I think Twitter. And I'm like, hey, I read your article on this thing. It was fantastic. He's like, oh, that wasn't me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize I had left your site. My bad, guy. But your other stuff's great.
and he's a genuinely very very
Yeah.
nice guy. I highly recommend if you're not following him on Twitter that you do. I know he has a new Kickstarter coming out.
Oh,
Definitely check it out. Oh yeah, the Kickstarter is fantastic. Hang on, I'll actually shout it out because Mike's good people.
yeah, he's good.
Shout
You
him
know,
out here a
he's
little bit.
done a lot for the community.
Let me.
So while you're doing
Uh,
that, one of the things that I believe he brought it up, but all of my sources get wildly crossed at this point, is the idea that a dungeon has to actually have a purpose. Uh, just having
mhm.
a series of rooms that are progressive challenges and there's a pile of gold at the end doesn't really make sense. How would the owner of that gold get there and not be mauled by terrible alligators? Do they have to fight the
Mhm.
Minotaur every single time that they want to check their bank account? Like, what's happening here? Or one of my favorite ways is traps have to make sense. Traps have to have a
Yeah.
way to be bypassed. I have I love my place. It's fantastic. If I really wanted to, who cares? Pile of gold. If I really, if I really wanted to, to prevent burglars from coming in, I could put an Indiana Jones buzzsaw trap. Every time the door opens, buzzsaws fly out. That would prevent visitors and burglars. How do I get past that though? Like every trap is supposedly in a dungeon protecting the dungeon from ne'er-do-wells, but has to be a point behind it. And even beyond traps, just having a dungeon layout that makes sense is absolutely huge. If you have my favorite dungeon style is, this is a wizard who became a lich and did his thing underground. That's my favorite dungeon trope to build. I ran it with Tomb of Horrors, still running it with Tomb of Horrors, and most of my one-shots have unfortunately hit that, which I tried to avoid, but just sort of fall back into that niche. But when I do that, I try to build in, hey, this is an area where the wizard could actually have lived. This guy lives underground and is doing horrible things, sure, but he still needs a bed, he still needs a place to sleep, he still needs a place to eat and cook and study. All that stuff has to be there. Everything else, if it's just, all right, you walk into a room and there's a minotaur, you fight the minotaur and it dies. You walk into a room and there's 14 pit traps. All right, well, you get over those and you move on with your life.
You know what's missing in mini dungeons?
A way out.
Castles, houses, towns.
Yep.
Where do they use the bathroom?
Yeah.
There's no privy. Privies are absolutely a requirement. If anything, there's a couple reasons for it. One, what people do. Two, privies create other opportunities for escape or entry, infiltration, if you're feeling foul enough. And it wouldn't be the first time a privy has been used to infiltrate a castle, unfortunately.
I think it's one of the most traditional ways to actually break into a castle is to go up the gong farm. It's gross and horrible, but yeah, that's a big point of weakness. On that point, though, if you're building an underground dungeon, chamber pots, boom, there you go, because there's nothing else you can do there. But then you need chimneys.
But you still got to have a place to empty them.
Yeah. Oh, you go outside and you give it to the minotaur. There we go. But yeah,
carrion crawlers, neo-otogs.
Yeah, but that does tie into if people are supposed to be living in that dungeon, how do they survive in this dungeon? Has it been sealed forever? Well, then why is there a bugbear in your dungeon that doesn't have anything? It's just hanging out there. There's goblins in your dungeon that are just hanging out there and haven't been outside for 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Please explain that. So you got to make your dungeon denizens make sense. You got to make the dungeon layout make sense for the people who are supposed to be in it. Prestidigitation is everywhere is a bathroom, and prestidigitation between Dire Rabbit and Vash the Stampede. Yes, that solves all your problems. Never mind. Build dungeons how you want. But a logical dungeon. I try to do that. There's a trope in D&D where every room is a challenge and a fight, and you have to do it. And this isn't just D&D. This is tabletop role-play in general. But if you're, everyone's like, all right, well, you just have to go there. The dungeon doesn't really have a purpose. It's just a series of challenges. You mentioned video games for their dungeon styles. Skyrim is awful at that. It's probably the most popular current available dungeon crawly game. The dungeons make no logical sense. Like, if the person wants to go do a thing in this dungeon that is allowed to do that, they have to fight through all these things and pull all these things and jump through traps and sliding stone doors and all that don't make any sense except for this is built for adventurers.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to, with mixed results, I'm trying to avoid that and try to make my dungeons better by making them more logical, even if it's not as wildly exciting.
Yeah, I think the way I do it is I start with a story. It's not, a lot of people build their dungeons as like, here's my monster farm and trap farm, and then boom, and they start with the monsters and the traps. I don't. I start with what's the story behind why this exists.
Yeah.
What's the geography of it, and then you build that, and then if it's caves or dug subterranean layers or a combination of the two or whatever, and then I start populating with what makes sense based on the story.
Yeah.
So, for example, the sewer traps had stuff that would be in a sewer. I won't do any reveals with what's coming for where you guys are likely to head or not, if you guys feel like just ruining the plot. But that's, say you're in the Underdark for some reason and you're in Blending Stone, all right?
No.
Or say you're in just in the Underdark in general. What are you going to encounter in the Underdark that you would not encounter anywhere else that makes sense? but it can't be a series of things that are close together that don't make sense together as well. You can't have certain characters work, you could have some creatures working that happen to be transporting something in a clay pot that turns out to be a black ooze. Yeah, that makes sense because the black ooze couldn't get out of a strap down clay pot that's sealed. But if they fight the ogres off that are carrying this clay pot and the clay pot falls over, guess what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Those two things don't normally work together, but there's a storyline. They're moving it somewhere. They're going to use it to do something. The black ooze is being used as a tool, whatever.
And we have Amber Anna 391 actually kicking in there with personally thinking that it's okay to sacrifice realism for fun and all that. If this is more of on a dungeon masters kind of thing, you generally don't necessarily explain all of these things to your players. You're not going to sit out there and say, oh, this is why this thing happened, or this is why that thing happened. Or if if they don't search around, they just quickly move through a room, they don't realize the lived-in status of the dungeon or the cave dwelling and stuff. But as dungeon masters, it's kind of important for us to have a realistic, this is how this world lives, this is how this ecosystem inside this dungeon survives. Because if we start ignoring the basic necessities of that, then we just have carte blanche to do whatever we want to do. And it doesn't matter if these people can get fed or not, or if those goblins down there have been underground for 14,000 years.
You're not going to discover an owlbear in the Underdark under normal circumstances. Just not.
If there is an owlbear in the Underdark, you'd better
there's
have
a
good reason for it. Even if you never tell your players for it, you as a GM need to know why that monster is there.
Because it could come up. They could skill check it.
Yeah.
They could figure things out. You never know who's going to be like, you know what?
This doesn't make sense.
It's 15 sessions later, and I've got access to a crystal ball of scrying. I really want to know how the hell that owlbear got down there in that subterranean lair. So now you better explain that there was a wizard. He did a summoning spell. The thing got loose. It never actually got, sent back. Thanks to the Fazerness in the Underdark, and I just made all that stuff up as I go. But generally speaking, like there has to be some story there, because that's also part of the clues. That's also part of the who's a what's a huh. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And also, if it doesn't make sense, it becomes campy and slapstick very quickly.
Yeah, people walk into a room and say, all right, what's going to kill us in here? Oh, what's the trap here? I'm looking for the, it's like, no, that's, while I do love a very tropic, I guess tropic would be the adjective version of trope.
I think that's a word you like to use, yeah.
Yeah. I like that kind of role-playing game, that sword and sorcery, old-school Tolkien-esque stuff. But even then, like, in a long-term campaign, you need some logic behind what's going on there. Yeah, but that's just my opinions on that. Having a decently packed up dungeon is worthwhile. If you have friends, if you're the GM, and they just want to fight random things and they don't really care why they're there or how they got there, sure, have a party. Make your encounters and just feed them to it. Make the the random encounter generator. That'll be your best friend ever. People will love that if that's what they're there for. But most players in Dungeons and Dragons are there for the story as a major leading factor. And as GMs, we kind of owe it to them. We owe it to our players to give them the best story we can, because otherwise we're kind of doing everybody at the table a disservice. There's a lot of weight on your shoulders as the GM, and if you kind of start cutting corners in places where you shouldn't, you're going to start letting people down.
Yeah. It'll create more confusion, and it becomes less immersive.
Yeah.
If you don't really want that in your campaign, obviously go hog wild. But for the kinds of stuff that we're talking about, it's to create that thing that the players are actually hooked in and seriously involved in. If they don't feel like they're hooked in, what often happens is they start making decisions that aren't based on self-preservation or other normal traits that living creatures have. They just, they think to themselves, well, I can just respawn later, which is not something we as human beings can actually do. But in a game setting, they may rethink that if they don't have any player buy-in.
Or you get the players that are, it's like, I'm going to do this because it'll be interesting and funny, and I want to see how this gets out of this. At which point you've kind of lost the point of the campaign that you're doing if it's a story-driven campaign. I've been to campaigns where that's a thing, and that's everyone's just kind of trying to one-up each other on the lulls. The lulls, yeah. it's youth speak.
There can be a time and place for that.
Yeah.
I don't know that for ongoing long-term campaigns that works very well.
So one of the last points I want to go ahead and close out with, because we're rapidly approaching 9 o'clock, is how do you kick out for treasure there? And I'm not asking simply because I'm in one of your campaigns, but I'm asking for our humble audience out there. How do you determine what kind of treasure they're getting when they finish their random encounter? Treasure or rewards. We can give you more than just valuables.
I have, excuse me. I actually have read through both the DMG and the Xanathar's Guide on
What? Why?
Yeah, because it's actually very useful. So, no, and for the chat, no, I will not tell anybody where the loot is. The loot is where the loot is. When you find it, you find it. When you don't, you don't. So I typically actually have more loot than is required for your tier in every dungeon, because you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
You may miss stuff. But I need to have a certain amount of things on tier for the characters to find. And some of those things may be certain unique items that are spotlighted, that are very obvious which character class or race that might be for. Whereas some other things may be very specifically anything goes or utilitarian. And those kinds of things are important to note. So if something absolutely has to be found, you need to place it where it will absolutely be found. Yeah. If something doesn't need to absolutely be found, just place it wherever you find it to be entertaining. You should definitely take a look at the Xanathar's Guide to have a look at a review of what the characters already have. You need to also discover treasure sinks, and it's a way to, by sink I mean something they've got a cool shiny new item. Do they really need the old item? How are they getting rid of it? And there is a point where there's too many items. One of the great things that 5th edition did is they limited the amount of items that you can have that require attunement, and certain items that are the more useful and powerful an item is, the more likely it requires attunement. So it limits a party's or a character's ability to overload up or to do certain combos, because you can't do certain combos without certain items. And
yeah, exactly.
You're basically making choices at that point. What do you keep versus what do you not? And there's certain things to be said about encumbrance and carrying around 800 pounds of magical gear as well. So utility items like the alchemy jug, or a bag of holding, or Nolzur's marvelous pigments, or a portable hold, those, or even the immovable rod, those are all very useful items. None of which that I'm aware of require attunement per se.
Yeah, maybe the alchemy one, but I've never actually encountered that.
No,
so
doesn't.
Everything else doesn't require that.
No, it doesn't. It's great. The other thing, though, that is out there is you then have things that are particularly potent and powerful, like there's the boots of strutting and springing. There is the ring of telekinesis. There is a variety, of other legendary artifacts and stuff too. If you could have an unlimited amount of those and they didn't require attunement, you'd be so powered up, it's not even fun. So
yeah, that's a hurdle you need to jump over on that one.
So because of attunement and because of just the certain amount of items that you can have and how many you can wear, and you can only have so many rings, you can only use so many wands, you can only have so many cloaks, you can only have so many boots, those kinds of things. And then some of those require attunement as well. You got to make some choices. So yeah, you can throw them all in a chest and then eventually be the owner of your own fine dungeon full of magical items that someone's going to come after you for.
Yeah.
Or you can sell off the items you don't need just to keep the ones you do need, or to exchange them for other ones that you'd prefer to find potentially as well. So how do I do magic items? My magic items are based on a series of things that I know you want versus a series of things I know you need versus a series of things that I know you don't, but are kind of interesting anyway. And also some items that they are there. They do what they wish. You have some opportunity there. And also a fair number of disposable items, potions, scrolls, so on.
Yeah.
Those are all based on those tiers. And then in some cases, if it gets to be too much, I have the option to have certain things destroyed or stolen permanently. It just depends on what needs to happen for the
absolutely
plot to continue, or to lasso in something that's gotten out of hand.
Yeah, I've seen a couple ways to deal with, and we'll do this in a future episode there, but how to deal with players who are abusing the special item that you gave them and that kind of thing. But for actually building, and you're just kicking out rewards, I try to avoid just giving away raw gold if possible. Like, yes, at the end of the dungeon, you're going to get a sack of several hundred gold at a minimum, just because that's expected. But generally, what I'll end up doing is I'll figure out how much gold you should get out of this, and then start cutting out of that budget to actually kick out rewards. So it's like, all right, this is a 10,000 gold piece dungeon. You're only going to get 3,000 gold out of that, so I have 7,000 gold to build out with magic items or potions or just better gear in general. Everyone's coming through in ring scale. Okay, cool. Check it out. There's full or half plates. There's nicer helmets. There's all sorts of gear here, and sort of factor all of that into the overall budget of the room. And then from there, you can start kicking into magic items and all. That's kind of how I approach it, to see what the party needs. Because if they're crawling through the dungeon, they're growing out in the wilderness, and there's very little chances of them actually hitting another town, well, at a certain point, the paladin needs to have full plate. At a certain point, the fighter needs to have better swords than the starting weapons. And if they're not going to a town, I need to be the one to supply that. So I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the party and what they actually need, and give them that, and then a whole bunch of other useless garbage that they don't want. So that's...
Yeah, I do. Before any adventure begins, I tend to have some mapped out stuff at tiers. Not always specific items. I always have a utility of items, and I have more items available than there are likely for you to find, or offered, and then whatever goes from there happens. And then I leave some utility room in there for, maybe at tier 1 you weren't really thinking about it, but at tier 2, Adgren decides he really wants a wand that does a certain thing, or a staff that does a certain thing, and so he may mention to me, hey, I'd really like to find this, and there's some other options. There's some downtime options to find some stuff. You might find it in the shop, whatever. But that's part of the story as well. So that if I put that in, I'm sure to take something out that would also possibly be at the same level.
Yeah, you don't want to drown them in magic items, because then the challenge disappears.
But by having that tier mapped for not just magic items, but for treasure as well, it means I don't break the economy or the system that's there, and I can plug them into various adventures, and I track when they find certain things, so I already know where they're at versus the tier. You don't have to make that too crazy. Sometimes you can get a feel for what that needs to look like. Your concern is definitely have some opportunities with a culminating opportunity as well.
Yeah,
but it is what it is. So
I think
definitely look at that.
I think one of the great ways to gauge that is Xanathar's has a magic, at this level, everybody should have access to this many magic items. I find that I've used that a couple times when running larger or higher level campaigns off of scratch. That's very, very useful. So we can't overstress the whole read your rule books kind of thing. That advice is the biggest thing we can do.
Yeah, the other benefit of that is when you start at higher levels, you know what to tell the characters. Okay, you can pick magic items from the following. Each character can have this many of this level, one of these at this level, so on and so on. Hey, Duval King Jubub, good to see you following us. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And also, thanks to Maddie Morgs for following us as well. So good to see you guys.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, do you really have to put the mouse arrow right on my nose there, buddy?
I don't know why it's doing this, but sure, I'll take it.
Because you're holding it over the yeah. Thanks. Ooh, that tickled just a little bit.
I hate technology so much.
You want to pick my nose with it next?
Let's see. Yeah. But anyway, guys, it is 9 o'clock here. It's been 9 o'clock for a while, so this ran a little bit longer than we were hoping. But it was a good conversation. Reid, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah.
Unless there's anything else from the chat, though, I think we're going to go ahead and sign off momentarily. It's been 9 p.m. for 9 minutes. Get out. So unless there's anything else. Oh, thank you so much, Kick Up High, cheering 100 bits. You're fantastic. I can't think of anything else out there. There's a bunch of programs. I've been actually diving recently into a lot of the DM's Guild stuff for the thing that we're running elsewhere. So kind of got to plug them, check them out, I guess. Otherwise, check out all of the various, use your resources, read your books. If you guys have any questions, we have a Discord. Check it out. We're more than happy to engage with the guests or in the various community that we have. The Discord is a great place for that. We have a very thriving. Is that how you describe that? We have a decent community, thriving community there.
I would say not only is it thriving, but it's welcoming, warm, and actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to be there.
Yeah, and it's been fun hearing from them and getting their ideas as well. So the more the merrier, obviously.
Yeah, we have opportunities to host games. I think we have 2 or 3 non-streamed community games that are happening. We have a bunch of different chat rooms, a bunch of different things you guys can talk about, a bunch of different places you can go to get advice or to tell us how we're doing things, how you would do things a little bit differently. So join in. I can't.
Miniatures, painting stuff, art from people making art.
Oh yeah, the art section's fantastic.
Yeah.
So once we kick out of here, I don't want to, if I try to adjust the Discord or copy the Discord link with us still streaming, I'm going to get rid of Reid, and no one wants to not see that. So who are we rating? I believe that we're
going to be rating WebDM. We're going to be rating WebDM.
Ooh, that'll be fun. I've seen some of their stuff, so.
Yeah.
All right, well, unless there's anything else from the chat, I think that's going to be us for the evening. Thank you so much for stopping by, Reid. And everybody out there, thank you so much for the piles of engagement we got today. I'm super excited to see all the... All right.
My body is ready for rating. All right.
Thank you so much for everybody. Have a good night.